Yeah, boy, it's August 12th, and it's episode 117, and this is the Fantasy Football Auctioneer. I'm your host, Uncle Buckets. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer is the official podcast of the fantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/fantasy football auctioneer, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Fantasy Auction. We also have the Fantasy Football Auction community set up online on Twitter. You can take a look at us there. It's at FF Auction Advice. You can connect with auction players from all over the world. We've got a great show for you tonight. Tonight, we're going to take a look at wide receivers. It's the wide receiver special, looking at strategies, rankings, and much, much more. But, of course, our experts, they're always here. Well, actually, Blister, I know I put it on the script that feels cheesy, but, I don't know why I keep saying we're always here, because the last few weeks it's been two or none or two. So Slim's off. He's got a slow pitch playoff game to play tonight, so it's just me and Mr. Blister. So anyways, he's prepping for his second annual Boston Pizza Fantasy Football Draft. Blister, it's on again this year. And I'm coming for you for the title this year.
You know what? There could be a few players this year that actually know a little bit about football. After we talked about it so much last year, it was a good idea. It was for you and I. We had a lot of fun with it, and actually the prize is pretty darn good too. So, I don't know how many people we really want to know. It would be nice to battle with you again in the championship. When is the date of that? You got it?
I don't know. He didn't know. I was supposed to. Okay. I tried to connect with him last week, but we couldn't. We couldn't get a time together because he wanted to sit down and talk about how to run it, I think, more effectively this year. So, but I'm gonna try to get there before we head up the lakes, maybe next week. So
why doesn't he just ask one of us to run it then?
Well, I think maybe that's what he's doing. I'm not 100% sure.
I mean, holy crap! We both commissioned a number of leagues in our time, and it's not any easier than holding the draft and then putting it on the internet, and bam, it's all good to go.
Yeah. So anyways, whatever. I just thought we had a lot of chatter about that league last year, and just thought it'd be a good way of me telling you that he's planning on running it again.
Well, that sounds like fun. This is excellent.
So anyways, Slim, hopefully you cut the grass tonight, or not tonight, but maybe this weekend, and you can listen to us as an actual listener. I know it was fun for me when I got a chance to do it. Blister, it's just going to be you and I tonight talking about wide receivers.
Oh, you're not going to play that, are you? Just you and I.
Well, I might now that you said that.
And we lost all of this.
I really need a soundboard. Like, it'd be nice if I just had all that stuff preloaded and I could just play it now rather than having to find it and stay up all hours of the night. But I like to do it just for those couple of people on iTunes that say it sound like the morning zoo. I like it just for that reason alone.
That's good. Anyways,
let's get into it. If you guys are ready, then I'm ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. And actually, before I did it, just because Hammer's been on my mind here, my brother-in-law, Greg Hammer, he's listening to this in the vehicle on his way out to Calgary. Well, I imagine he won't listen to it till next week after the wedding. So he'll be listening, and instead of listening to, Elsa sing her Frozen song. So he's going to be missed. I had some good nights, Blister, late night saunas, some beers under, it was good. A little dive in the lake. It's good. So
and now the millions and millions of people will know his name.
Now they will.
Hammer.
The Hammer. Actually, I think someone photoshopped his head onto Greg the Hammer Valentine's body, which I thought was pretty good too. So maybe I'll try to find that for the.
There you go.
For the icon tonight. Anyways,
that sounds good.
The Hammer. So we got a great show tonight. We're going to talk wide receivers. We do have some Twitter questions, and we are going to go through the news, and then we'll get into some wide receiver talk. So first segment coming up here is We Just Got a Letter. I know, and I like that there was a guy who sent us an email who said that brought a little nostalgia to his heart when he heard Blue's Clues on there. So,
there are some supporters, right?
There are some supporters, so I'm sticking with it.
Some hate it. Like, you can't please everybody. Right. So
that's right. No such thing as bad press.
Right.
I don't know. We're getting pressed for it. But anyways, you can reach us on Twitter if you have any questions. It's at Fantasy Auction. If it's more than 140 characters, you can email us. It's footballauctioneer@gmail.com. The first question here comes from Stu Balls. So at Stu Balls 16 asks, if Martavis Bryant is as good as his hype, how does it affect Antonio Bryant's draft value? Or
Antonio
does it
Brown.
affect it at all? Antonio Bryant.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, and Martavis, Dez, and Antonio Bryant, they're all twins. They're triplets, actually. So
yeah, there you
all
go.
Talented.
So anyways, does it affect his draft value at all?
I don't think it does. Antonio had 181 targets last year. I still think he'll be the most heavily targeted player on the Steelers. I really think he maybe even gets a little uptick when Le'Veon Bell is out, because they might look to him even more so. So right now, I think Martavis is he's still going to carve out that number 2 role. Right now, Marcus Wheaton looks to have he'll stay on the field in 2 and 3 wide receiver sets, versus Martavis is only going to be out there in 3 wide receiver sets potentially. So I think Martavis right now, people might be pumping the brakes a little. I mean, he was off for 10 days with that elbow infection.
Yeah.
I just think overall, get back to the question here, does it affect his draft value, if any? No. I have been in a number of auctions and other drafts as well, and Antonio is one of the first receiver off the board. Often goes for over $50 in an auction. So no, I don't think it affects his value, and it doesn't scare me one bit. I would take him number 1.
Yeah, and I think the only real thing that it does is that Antonio helps Martavis, right? I think he's the guy that's the effector, right? It's not. I don't think vice versa. Yeah. So,
no. I mean, you always want to have that scary number 2 threat, whether it's Martavis or Marcus Wheaton, who, I mean, he could be a good PPR play this year if he's going to jump into the slot and stay on the field more often. And, he had some good games last year. So
does it make Antonio Brown more valuable because he's actually going to have a number 2 this year?
I don't know. I don't know if he can be more valuable. I mean, if he was mediocre last year, say he had, he ended up with 129 receptions. Say he ended up with 75 or 80 only last year. Yeah, you might think that he could be more valuable now that they have a more, a 2 or 3 guys that can catch the ball. But I think that you can't get much more valuable than 129 receptions. I think that's a great spotting. He had 12, 13 touchdowns. So, it might be hard for him to maintain that number of touchdowns, but I don't think it's more. But he's very valuable, number 1.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. He's number 1, so it doesn't necessarily make him any better. Okay, next question here, Blister. This comes from at Mike Lalonde, number 1. Shout out to Newsy up in Dryden. So he's asking us, first of all, he makes the comment, who doesn't have fantasy football questions? Well, yeah, that's true enough. But yeah. Anyways, he says he's asking in a PPR, Blister, who are the top 5 wide receivers? Now, I was going to just steer him to the website, the Fantasy Football Auction, because it's all listed there, whether it's for free or not for free. The top 5 is pretty easy to find. But Blister, who do you have right now as your top 5?
Antonio Brown, Demaryius Thomas, Julio, Dez, and Odell Beckham Jr. Now, I had those same 5. I might have had Dez. I had a Julio, but I just what I like more so about Julio, I think he, as long as he stays healthy, like last year Antonio had 181 targets, Demaryius 184. I can't see that changing a whole lot for those 2 guys. They're the favorite weapons for their quarterbacks. Julio at 163, still nice, a high number, caught over 100 balls. Dez worries me a little bit because he only had 136 targets because they were so run heavy last year, and yeah, he kind of scares me at times because he has attitude, obviously, and he is a beast, but he worries me that sometimes he could just shut down if things aren't going well, or, I don't know. So, but I still think he's going to be right up there because he's very effective with the targets he gets. He had 88 grabs, and then OBJ, he had 130 targets last year, and he had 12 games he only played. So, I think his numbers are going to go up. There's a lot of people nervous with Odell Beckham this year, thinking he's going to regress, and he could, but I mean, I think he's got the talent that he could regress and still be a wide receiver 1, like, without a doubt. So I'm not scared of him at all, but those would be my top 5 in PPR.
Okay. And then for me, just because Slim's not here, well, I guess I can rattle off Slim's too. Slim's got Antonio Brown, number 1, Demaryius Thomas at 2, Dez Bryant at 3. So you guys match there. At 4, he's got Odell Beckham, and at number 5, he has Julio Jones. So you guys flip-flop there. And for me, I am 1 Antonio Brown, 2 Dez Bryant. So I differ from you guys there. Number 3, I have Julio Jones. 4 is Jordy Nelson. At number 5 is Demaryius Thomas. And I guess the big variant there is Demaryius Thomas. And I don't know. I just don't like the duck ball that I saw coming out of Peyton's hand all year. And that just towards the last half of last year, I just feel that he doesn't have the arm strength as much anymore. And if they're going to go a little bit more run heavy, then he's definitely going to regress. I mean, it's not like he's terrible at 5. I just think, and I just think without the strong running game in Dallas, that they're going to have to rely a little bit more on Dez, and that he's just the beast, and that's why I move him to 2.
Yeah, and that could very well be the case too. And Peyton, I'll be interested to see how Peyton starts, because he did finish fairly poorly last year, really poorly actually, and he was a bit banged up. So I don't know if that was old age and a tiring arm, or if it was a combination of other injuries or both. And so it'll be interesting to see how he comes out of the gate this year, and if he can keep that up for the full season, because as you get older, it takes the body a little longer to heal. I mean, things do start to break down. So it will be interesting. That's why I know, that's one of the reasons I'm starting to, I think a question coming up, but I'm Emmanuel Sanders hasn't been somebody he should be somebody I'd be just all over, because he had such a great year last year. Nothing has really changed, but there's a guy in that same offensive system that I don't know, I'm cautious with him, and I'm just avoiding him right now, because if I did take him, I'd be bummed, I think, if it was
Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah.
Bummed? Well, I mean, I got him in that mock draft last week that we did live on the air for the podcast. So if you wanted to listen to that live, last week we did a live mock draft with some of the listeners, and we just ran commentary while we were doing our mock, and we talked about different strategies that we were following just to try to get some information out there. But Emmanuel Sanders, I got for $20, and I felt pretty good about getting him for $20. Well, that's pretty good.
Like, if you get him for $20 and he is not even half the receiver he was last year, he'd still be a wide receiver 2. Yeah. He was a wide receiver 1 last year, I think, and he could still be a wide receiver 2, and that's pretty good value though for $20.
Right. So, I mean, it's all about the value in your draft. So there's our top 5s for you, Mike. Next question was from our friend from the Reception Perception, Matt Harmon. He asks a question here, he's asking whether or not, Blister, you're going to spend 25% of your budget on anyone. So that's first of all. And I guess if you look on our website, we have everything based on a $200 budget. So that'd be $50 or more on any one player. And then the second part of his question, and how would you allocate to 2 studs? So first part of the question, you paying more than $50 for anyone, Blister?
No, I don't think you need to. Like, there's obviously great players out there. I just think that if you look, when you look at the depth at wide receiver, I think there's probably 9 or 10 guys. If I look at my auction tiers, I got Antonio, Jordy, Demaryius, Dez, Odell, Julio. Call them my elite 45 to 50, although a lot of them will go for 48 to 55 probably. Right. And then right behind them, AJ Green, Calvin Johnson, Alshon Randall. I got Emmanuel Sanders in there, and DeAndre Hopkins.
You're talking about your tiers right now that you have in the members area.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So right there's 12 players though, and I know Antonio and Demaryius and Dez and Odell for sure. They're going to push you to the high 40s into the $50 range. But I don't think you need to do that, because I think Julio, if you can get him for cheaper, or AJ Green, I'm a little skeptical with Calvin, but Alshon Jeffrey, Randall Cobb, guys like that, if you can get them for 42 or 45 or 37, 38, those are all prices I see like Alshon and Randall and AJ Green going for, then I think you can save yourself $10, $12 or so on a receiver and still have a wide receiver 1 who could potentially be the wide receiver 1 overall at the end of the year, given health and given whatever's going on. Randall Cobb, he's going to put up great numbers. Alshon, it's a little worrisome with Cutler back there. AJ Green, I think he's really going to blow up this year and have another big year. They got a lot of different weapons in that game, so it's not just targeting AJ Green. They got a lot of good things going from. Andy Dalton was I think the number 2 quarterback only a couple of years ago. So I don't care what he does for his team in the playoffs, because our playoffs are done by then. We only care about up till week 16. If he can get the job done for our fantasy teams up until week 16, AJ Green then will be solid. So yeah, I'm not going to pay $50 on one guy, whether it's a running back or a receiver. I think there's too many guys that you can get from what I'm seeing in my mocks for $45, $40, $38. And Randall, Elshon, AJ Green are a few of the guys that you might want to target if you're looking to spend a little less but get that wide receiver one production. And how much would you allocate to two studs?
Hold on. I just want to go back to that first part of the question. So that's wide receivers. You're not thinking you're going to spend more than $50 on anyone, but let's take a look at it as just anyone. Are you spending $50 on anyone, like on Gronk or on running backs?
No, I mean, I'd like to have Gronk, but I think I don't want to go that high on a tight end. I mean, he's probably worth it. When he's in his prime, he puts up numbers that are comparable to a wide receiver one, which he probably will do again this year. When I look at running back, there's just too much. Le'Veon Bell would be about the only guy that I would consider paying $50 or more for. Eddie Lacy is good. Jamal Charles, I'm getting concerned here. Matt Forte, Marshawn Lynch, AP I like, but all those guys that are getting, they all have some hint of, are you sure? Because there is age creeping up there, and with age comes it's easier to become injured, and there's mileage on a lot of these guys too. So they concern me. I think that you could potentially get RB1 production for guys like CJ Anderson and Jeremy Hill. Maybe Justin Forsett even, for probably closer to the $35 mark or maybe $40. So I think, why spend $50 when you can get the same production for less, and then you have more money to give yourself some more depth or to strengthen other positions. So, if I thought that there was nobody else that could put up the comparable stats at the end of the year and I had to spend $50 to get that guy, I would. But I just think that there's other guys that potentially could pop up, and those, like some of the guys I mentioned.
Well, I think some of those guys that you mentioned in our big auction are probably going to go for over 60. So I'm not going to pull the trigger there, most likely. But if any of those guys, Le'Veon or Jamal Charles, AP, I just love. I think he's a swing for the fences kind of pick. If one of those guys fell into the 50s, I think that I might plus one on that nomination, just because I think the potential. I think a guy like AP, let's say, can win you the league. I think there's a lot of guys that can lose you the league, and I think he could lose you the league too. But I think, for all intents and purposes, if anyone's going to get, let's say, 2,000 yards this year, he could be the guy.
That's right. Oh yeah, I like him too, and I just don't think I'll be able to afford him.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's what I say. But if it's 53 for AP going once, going twice, I'm going to 54.
Yeah.
So, anyways, and so the second part of the question from Mr. Reception Perception with his pretty little NFL icon there on Twitter now too, which is nice. How much would you allocate for two studs? Let's just say for wide receivers. How much are you going to allocate in your budget blister for two stud wide receivers if you were going to go that route?
Because I think, like I said, you can get them anywhere from 37 to 45. I'm going to allocate about $90, we'll say. And I think you can get two solid ones. I look back, I really do believe, I like the studs and duds type of philosophy. I think you need that best player at each position. I'm a lot more comfortable going in if I got a Randall Cobb or a Jordy Nelson or AJ Green than if I have like a Larry Fitzgerald and Keenan Allen and guys like that, Kendall Wright, Julian Edelman. Edelman's good. He's going to get catches. He's going to get a couple hundred points, but these studs are going to get 380 points. And for example, last year in the auction, I had Le'Veon Bell and I had Antonio Brown and I had Gronk. So at the end of the day, and I had Russell Wilson, who was one of the top quarterbacks. But I got stud production out of those guys. They were number one in all their positions. But at the time, other than Gronk, I didn't pay top dollar for them. You know what I'm saying? Right. Antonio Brown wasn't the most expensive running wide receiver off the board last year. Le'Veon Bell wasn't the most expensive running back off the board. So there's a fine line between maybe a little bit of luck and also, like, I probably spent around 38, I want to think, on Le'Veon, because the year before I bought him as a rookie for 8 and he was banged up or suspended. And each year he started the year with some question marks. I thought last year we thought he might get, we were worried about him being suspended because before last season started, that him and Blount got caught with the pot. So Antonio Brown, same thing. I didn't pay. I can't remember what I paid. I don't have it. I got my roster here, but I don't have what I paid for him. So those two guys, I mean, when I look at the rest of my receivers last year, this is what I drafted: Antonio Brown, Pierre Garçon, you know, he did next to nothing. Wes Welker was a plug. Marcus Colston did very little. Harry Douglas and Caldwell from Denver. So
Right.
that's pretty gross. Running backs: Le'Veon, Rashad Jennings, Pierre Thomas, Bradshaw, and Pierce. Bradshaw was good at the start. Rashad didn't do much. So I put big bucks into Le'Veon and Antonio. I had Gronk and Kelsey at tight end, and Cutler and Wilson as my. And Gostkowski was the best kicker. I had him. So I mean, yeah, that's not how my team ended up, but that's what I put my money into. And again, it's not. So if I look at this year's auction, for example, and I think, what do I want to pay for 2 studs? Well, if I look at last year, if I think I can get that production from Randall Cobb for 42 and perhaps Justin Forsett for 35, then that's the way I'm gonna go. I'm gonna target about $90 for my top 2.
Okay. And then for me, I'm hovering around that 75 to 80 range. And for the same reasons you're saying, and I just look back at the draft that we did, the actual friend draft we did a few nights ago, like a week and a half ago now or so. But I got Julio Jones for 47 and Jordan Matthews for 30. So that was a $77 top 2 there, and then a Larry Fitzgerald slide in for $3 as my wide receiver 3. But that allowed me to do like what you were talking about before with those running backs and get that tier with the Jeremy Hill. I got Justin Forsett as well, so it allowed me to spend a little bit more money and get 2 higher level running backs rather than a Jeremy Hill and a Rashad Jennings. To get a Jeremy Hill and a Justin Forsett, and then all of a sudden, right? And then it freed up money, and I pulled out Todd Gurley for later on. And I know we hear that maybe now he won't start the first couple of games, but if week 8 he's in full force, I think that me saving a little bit of money in that top 2 wide receivers, my wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. So that's kind of why I went that way, and I like the looks of that team.
Oh, definitely. And I think, you really can. I think in both cases, I think there's some really good running backs and wide receivers in that mid-20s to mid-$30 range that, if you're comfortable with them and you have the confidence in them, pushing for a wide receiver 1 or a running back 1, then why spend 50 or 60 on them? And other guys, they want that stud. They know that they're going to anchor their team around Eddie Layton. That's fine. I mean, I'd love to have them on my team, but for the right price. If I was in an auction and Le'Veon was still sitting there at 45, or 48, I'm going to still probably bid on him, because if I can get him for that now, I think I got a deal because some people are going to pay 60, 65 for him in places, right? So it's about value. It's about keeping all your options open and having them, like we've always said, being flexible, having plan A, B, C, and D.
Well, I know that that's some of the things we're going to talk about when we actually get into the position, but it's just still good banter and it stays with it. I think if you can feel confident enough, running, why couldn't you run 3 wide receiver 2s? Right? Like,
you could.
Do not make it more than enough. Like if someone's got the 40th ranked guys, they're wide receiver 3, but they have a the number 4 wide receiver as a wide receiver 1. Why couldn't you have a Brandon Cooks, T.Y. Hilton, and Mike Evans as your 3 receivers?
Quite easily you could, and then you could really go after the 2 big running backs. I mean, right now, Brandon Cooks, Jordan Matthews, Allen Robinson, who is often looked over, but who wouldn't want him for a wide receiver 3? So you could be looking at about roughly 30 for Cooks. Matthews could go slightly cheaper. I haven't seen him go anywhere for these guys from 23 to 35, but let's say 30. 28, that's 58, and Robinson sometimes around $10, $68. You could have those 3 guys. Cooks is going to be. All 3 of those guys are going to be targeted more than anybody else in their team. They're going to be, they're going to put up great numbers. It's PPR we're talking again, so you got 3 guys potentially for $70, 1, 2, and 3, and then boom, you can turn around and spend another 90 or 100 maybe or so, not quite on your RB1 and 2, and then you're pretty stacked.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's just it. I mean, that's that flexibility that auction gives you, but you have to have this testicular fortitude to say, I don't have a clear wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
Right. I don't have a big dog.
No. But I think, if Cooks and all these guys stayed healthy, they would compete. They're not going to go out. any given week and get just blown away by Jordy or Dez or anybody like that, because they're all, the situations have all changed for Cooks and Matthews, especially from last year, because Cooks is the biggest show in town there now, and Matthews is the number one because Macklin left. So like they're going to be ranked and tiered lower, but really they have a potential to jump up. Like there's nothing stopping them except health problems. Hopefully they don't have any, from being a value of about $50, $60 if that they could produce like that. So that's kind of that's why you do a couple mocks to see what your team looks like at the end. And I'm pretty sure you'd be pretty happy if Cooks, Matthews, and Landry or Keenan Allen or Sammy Watkins or any of those guys as your three, Martavis Bryant, whatever. And then, you'd probably have a nice squad.
Well,
really
I like
nice squad.
to do that even
Maybe
just outside walking. When I'm sitting at the at the lake or whatever, I like to just like write out my teams. Okay, what if I'm on this budget scenario? It could look like this, this, and this, and have this guy. If I'm going to spend $80 on my receivers, well, what does that look like versus that? And you can see that just through average auction values, roughly what your team would look like, right? And working through all those different scenarios is, I find, very good practice for when I get into the draft, because I've seen those teams.
For sure.
I have a piece of paper that has all of those teams on it and what they look like. That's
exactly what I chart. Like I have an Excel spreadsheet of all my mock auctions or whatever I'm prepping for. Like when it was the Fishbowl, I mocked countless times from the number one, seeing if I took AP first or Antonio or how I like my team the best,
Yeah.
And that's what you got to do. I mean, each time you mock, you got to prep it towards that league. Like we've had auctions right now where you have 16 guys total, 17, 18, 20, whatever the case may be. So you need to mock. No kicker, sometimes just a defense, sometimes no kicker or defense. So you have to really take a look at what your team would look like. But that was a key when we talked about that a while ago, or I did an article, put some actual names to the numbers.
Yeah.
I want to spend $32 on my wide receiver too. Well, who are the guys that could be, and what's going to, how is that going to look? Because once you start looking at that, then oh man, I like this, or I can't quite live with that. And more often than not, the guys that are ranked number one and everything going in don't always end that way. So don't go in. You got to kind of let go of what happened last year, and you got to let go of being stuck on that number that, he's ranked this, I got to pay for him. He's going to be, because they're not going to finish like that exactly. That's impossible to predict.
Right. And then I like to, I guess, more aim and target for the tier rather than target for the player. I mean, there are some guys within the tier that I like, but more than others. And there's some guys that are ranked in the tier that I just put a line through anyways, because I don't
That's
want
what I do. When I get ready to go to the auction, I'll take my tiers and I'll go into my tier sheet and I'll highlight background red if I don't want to touch them, in green.
You can see red
or neutral. I got a pretty good one. I can see, but you're right. Maybe I should do blue and just white or something.
You're like, they all look brown and gray. I don't understand.
I don't understand it. I thought I hated this guy, but no, when did I start liking him? They're all the same color. It's weird, strange stuff.
Sorry, I'm a jerk. I apologize. Okay. You don't have any control over that. Anyways, okay, let's go into the third question before we get into some news here, Blister.
Sure.
At Derek Myers, who I do have to say I really enjoyed the little Twitter banter. He's the guy that's in the fan league with me in in my league in the Fishbowl.
Yeah.
So he's the one that won our fan spot. And did you see that, Blister? He tweets about what my face would look like after the news of Geno Smith getting punched in the jaw, because I went Geno Smith and like Blake Bortles, but my receivers are disgusting, and I have AP in that league. So, but I had to suffer somewhere, right? So so he had some stupid picture of
that's good.
Clint Eastwood. And then I didn't read it till I was out on a boat fishing. So I said, I'm on a boat. And then Slim's like, oh, you had me on a boat. And then he's got the, Prestige Worldwide video going on. And then other guys are doing it. So it was a good little thread there. So
that's good.
Thanks, Derek, for that.
Yeah.
Anyways, he's asking two questions here. Who's the consensus bottom of the wide receiver 2 ranks for us? And then the second part is, who's that guy in the wide receiver 3? So Blister, take a look at your ranks there, and who's that guy that's kind of around that 23, 24, which is Martavis Bryant, I think, in there.
You know what? Yeah, I got Jarvis Landry 23, Keenan Allen 24, Julian Edelman 20. But I'm gonna go to my because otherwise it's not right in the same order there. But if I look at my tiers, like I was saying, tier 1, I got Brown, Nelson, Thomas, Bryant, Beckham, blah 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 blah. So I get into about my tier 3. That gets me into about my wide receiver 2s. I got Evans, Tate, Hilton, Cooks, Matthews, Benjamin, Martavis, Bryant. I'd probably throw Jarvis Landry into that tier, and that would be about the bottom end of what I would want for my wide receiver 2. So, because I'm liking, especially in PPR, some really good receivers, where they're there. So out of my first 1, 2, 5, 12, 18, about Landry, I would throw Allen Robinson in there. Potentially Martavis Bryant still. I just think he doesn't need to be on the field as much as Marcus Wheaton to put up bigger numbers. So that's the bottom end of mine. Calvin Benjamin, guys like that. And then so my wide receiver 3s would potentially start with Keenan Allen, Julian Edelman, maybe Andre Johnson, Sammy Watkins, guys like that, Jeremy Maclin potentially. I think those guys would be solid. And then, that's probably my cutoff right there.
Okay, and then
a lot of the guys in my tier 4.
So Blister does have his actual tier sheet. It's sitting up on the website under the members area. So if you become a member of the website, which more and more, we were busy, Blister. Monday was a busy day. Today was a busy day as far as guys, finally getting ready for their draft. But you can go on. Yeah. You can go on in the members area. You can see Blister's actual tier sheet. And I mean, it's the one he brings into our draft. It's not just something that he, right, Blister? That's what you're actually use, right?
That's what I'll be bringing in. Yeah.
And when
I'll be bringing that in, I won't be bringing in the values. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. When he updates the sheet, it's there live as he updates it, and it's downloadable for you on an Excel spreadsheet, a Google sheet, so you can edit. And because we really promote that too. Don't just say, hey, Blister always knows what he's talking about. I'm bringing Blister sheet in. Use Blister sheet as the backbone of your tiers or your ranks if that's what you want, but then make it your own. And so we're giving you that opportunity to be able to download his actual sheet or Slim's actual sheet. I have my cheat sheet that I used for that draft a few days ago. It's sitting there right on the spread on there. No, that's this year's, just the one we did with that ESPN draft. So that's listed on there too, and you can just download it, edit it. It's got all the colors that I used and all the stuff. It's my actual sheet. So I mean, obviously, I'm going to tweak it a little bit before we go into our big one, but you can head on to our site, thefantasyfootballauction.com, and look at that. So I'm looking at mine right now, right off our spreadsheet, and in that ranks for me is the Martavis Bryant, Deshaun Jackson, Amari Cooper, Jarvis Landry. I kind of like maybe some Steve Smith in there, some Colston too, kind of in that little bit of a mix. And then if we move down, I'm not afraid because I think I'm going to spend a little bit more on 1s and 2s. So again, like who would be my lowest guy as a wide receiver 3? It's hard to say because of how much I think I'm going to spend up there. I don't think I'm going to have less than $10 for that wide receiver 3. So you're looking at guys like Decker or Bolden,
very solid.
Those types of guys. Right?
Bolden's still very solid. Steve Smith is very solid, and he's not going to cost you very much money.
Larry Fitz, I took him in that draft that we were talking about. So I don't know. That's
Marvin Jones starts to show something, If Marvin Jones shows something over through the preseason here, he could be a guy that you'd want in there. John Brown from Arizona is looking good, and with Michael Floyd being banged up, he could be really good. Eddie Royal, I mean, I don't like him a lot, but I just think he's going to be solid in that offense with Jay Cutler there, and all reports are looking really good. Even Vincent Jackson's not getting the love, but you could slide him in as a pretty solid wide receiver 3.
For $1 or $2
so there's some guys in there for sure.
Okay, so
you could have.
Yeah. So anyway, so those are some Twitter questions that we had. It's at Fantasy Auction. You can hit us up on Twitter. So let's get into the next segment here. Blister only put 3 news items, so we can try. We've been talking lots of strategy and stuff, anyways, just now. Anyway, so that's good. So there'll be a few things we can touch on later on. Segment number 2. This is the Fantasy Football News, Buy or Sell. So in the news buy or sell, we take a look at news items that are out there right now, and we ask the experts, well, Blister tonight, whether he's buying or selling, the implications of that news item. So I tried to keep it somewhat relevant to wide receivers, but I did have to get a Cowboys backfield in because you can't. I don't think anybody in the industry can have a podcast right now without talking about that backfield. So I thought I would talk about the backfield. So the first question the first headline here is Michael Floyd dislocates his fingers. Speaking of wide receiver threes, he was one of the guys that I kind of have in that area too. Michael Floyd dislocates his fingers. There were 3 of them, but hopes to miss no games. So he said it wasn't so much in pain, but it was more shock when he looked down and he saw things that he says were just gnarly. He had 3 fingers that were going left and right. But Bruce Arians thinks that, and Michael Floyd himself thinks that he's not going to be missing any games as far as regular season games. The Cardinals do open the season on September 13th against the Saints. So, Blister, the question is buy or sell. With this news, this moves Michael Floyd into that maybe $2 range because right now his AAV is 6. Like, does this actually affect his auction value?
Brakes. Yeah, he doesn't need anything more negative, I guess, going against him. Last year, everyone had him pegged as this big breakout, and he was really, really a big dud. And so I don't think people, their feelings are still going to be hurt from last season. So, and they thought, maybe they had a little glimmer of hope while the season's gone by. He's going to maybe learn he'll be better. And all of a sudden, boom, I heard it was just gross. His fingers were just so out of place that it was just
3 of them,
like
right?
gross. Yeah. So I think definitely, again, we mentioned John Brown a little earlier, who spent a lot of time with Carson Palmer all summer. I think he lived with him for a while. He's just been working hard, put on some extra meat so he can get away from, get himself some separation. And everything is pointing to Brown right now.
Yeah.
I think Michael Floyd, this does drop him down to the $2-3 range. You might be taking a flyer on him at the end of your draft, hoping that you get something out of him. But yeah, I think I buy that this moves him down.
Well, wouldn't that be nice though if you did get to just pick him up for $1 or $2 as your wide receiver 3? Sure. I mean, he's a big name with ceiling, right? I mean, floor for wide receiver
not getting any under.
Yeah. Yeah. But if your floor is Michael Floyd's floor, that's not too shabby, right? I mean, he finishes the 40th or whatever. PPR receiver last year. If I look here, where was he? 44th.
Yeah.
So let's say he does a little bit better than that. He did get 100 targets last year. So let's say he stays with 100 targets but catches a couple more footballs. All of a sudden he could be in that 30 to 35 range, right?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I just thought I heard the sirens going off. I'm here. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I thought you lost me.
Tornado
we got some pretty
siren
heavy storms coming through here in the area. So just keep that in mind. If we do blank out of here, I'll probably just leave it. I'll just probably leave the pod as is and post it anyways. We've got enough good content. All right.
Go down and
headline number 2, Blister, is running back Gus Johnson gets a chance at Cowboys camp. So during Monday's practice yesterday, so it'd be Monday, August 10th, yet another Dallas Cowboy running back missed practice when Joseph Randle sat out with an oblique injury. So Run DMC and Lance Dunbar are on the shelf right now. So they brought in the undrafted free agent Gus Johnson to take a look at him throughout camp. So if we take a look at Gus Johnson, he came out of the Southland Conference. He was the player of the year there. He rushed for over 1,600 yards, 23 touchdowns. He averaged 6.2 yards per carry over his career. So not too shabby and, not drafted. So the Cowboys now taking a look there. So who knows what the heck's happening back there, Blister. So buy or sell, the Gus bus is draftable if you're drafting this weekend.
You know what? Why not? I'll buy that. Buy him for $1. It doesn't hurt. You want to get that starting running back for the Cowboys, and as much as people are leaning towards that being Joseph Randle, there's nothing been said or put in stone, and there's no guarantees. So if it turns out to be Gus Johnson, hey, and you got him for $1, you could have the best value of the draft. So, there's always that guy you take. I honestly haven't seen Gus go in any auctions or any drafts of any kind yet. I don't even know if he's in any databases. I sure hope he is. But you know what? It's $1. The guy's got some good numbers there, and who knows? Like, there's always that guy, like Alfred Morris. Look at Alfred Morris a few years back, the undrafted running back who's been now starting for the Redskins and been a top running back.
What about a guy that has a pulled groin right now?
What
was his name? Arian Foster.
Yeah, narrow it down. Yeah, there's a lot of pulled groins out there. But you know what I mean? Like that happened. Yeah, Arian Foster. Sorry, yeah, he was undrafted too, wasn't he? So you know what? Well, why not? I mean, he's got a great line to run behind. Like what I like they said about him, and he's a unique build compared to the rest of the running backs they have there. And that's kind of good. I mean, I think that bodes well for him. He looked good on the goal line. So, hey, if he's a goal line back, and maybe who knows, this guy, why not take a chance? You're always looking for guys that have a high upside potential, and I think if there's a guy who's starting for the Cowboys behind that line, they have a high upside potential. So
my idea is late in the draft, when you're just throwing out your dollar players or whatever it is, you go for them. Obviously, I think in the draft, because what happens if week 2 he has 2 touchdowns? Now you're putting in 20% of your waiver wire budget to get this guy when it costs you, and you can just drop him if he doesn't even make the team. I think that's why you draft him, is that so that you don't have to fight for him on waivers later on.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, that's like a lot of guys.
That's why I took Ahmad Bradshaw in a couple of drafts, because if he does sign with somebody, boom, he's on my team.
And that's a good point. And like probably hasn't thought about that as much other years as I have now, but you see guys that always at the end of your draft, you're looking at a Matt Jones, Cameron Artis-Payne, Javoris Allen, or Buck Allen, or whoever you want to say. And I like all 3 of those guys, and all 3 of them could be potential starters, could be potential producers at some point this year. Is quite realistic, and you can pick them up for $1, but you better believe that if Justin Forsett goes down and Buck Allen's on the waiver wire, he is going to cost you a large chunk of your budget, and you might not be able to get him. So if you save some room for those guys, hopefully if you got room, depending on how deep your bench is and stuff like that. But I'd say any more than 5 or more player bench, get one of those type of guys on your bench that could be a producer for you.
Right. And I mean, most guys aren't going to have to really think about this too much, because we're going to see preseason and all those things before most drafts go on. But someone's probably drafting this weekend on the 15th. And,
for sure.
So take a shot on them. Why not? No sense. Might as well do it now rather than fight on the waiver for them, or just drop them and pick the next guy up on the waiver anyways.
That's right. It doesn't cost you much then, eh?
That's right. And you're probably going to have $1 or $2 left over in your budget anyways. So how does that
That's
hurt you, right?
Yeah.
All right. So third item here, Blister, and then we'll go into some more wide receiver stuff. Well, I guess I made this linked to wide receiver, but Geno Smith with the broken jaw is out 6 to 10 weeks, like we mentioned earlier. So he got into a locker room altercation, and I'm not even going to attempt the guy's name, not only because I wouldn't been able to pronounce it, but also because he's just a reserve linebacker. So some chump guy that was, trying to make the practice squad. Cole cocked or sucker punch Geno Smith in the dressing room, broke his jaw. And and so now sounds like Geno Smith's probably going to be out 6 to 10 weeks. So the question here, Blister, is buy or sell the beard, Ryan Fitzpatrick, makes Brandon Marshall or Eric Decker, and I guess Eric Decker, even better.
I don't think it hurts him at all. I know Geno had been having a really good camp, but the old the bearded one, he can sling the ball around as long as he's hitting Decker and Marshall and his team and not throwing picks, then they'll be okay. He's had some good years when he was back with Buffalo. They came out of the gate strong. I was looking at some of his stats. He's had games where he's thrown 4 touchdowns. Last year, he with 6 touchdowns in one game. And so, the guy can throw. He's got some good weapons there. I think they're going to be a run-heavy team still. I think they're going to, they're going to start with the run, and I don't think he's going to probably have too many games where he gets more than 25 throws. I think he'll limit him to 25 or less probably. But you know what? I don't think it can hurt them. But if you think about that, when I was looking at his stats in the past, I mean, different teams, obviously, his first year with the Jets, but yeah, he was often, high teens, low 20s and attempts and stuff like that. So if you're thinking that if a quarterback's only, let's even bump that up to 25, if they're only throwing 25 times a game, how many, if you're looking at a PPR team, Decker, Marshall, guys like that, how many catches can they actually have? And some of those passes probably worse for somebody in the backfield. He always liked throwing it to his tight end. So I worry about the overall value of them. And again, because I think that they're going to run the ball first. So
it helped. Do you think it helped Chris Ivory then?
Well, I think they were going to run the ball the same anyways. I think they might have, who knows how much confidence they have in Fitzpatrick, but he just always finds a way onto the field, And I think, I just don't think, overall helping, harming, I don't know. I don't have a ton of confidence in Geno or Fitz. I think they'll be okay, serviceable. One week they might throw 3 touchdowns, and then the next week they could throw 3 picks, and they could do that all in the same game. And I just think they're probably heavy on the run first. So I kind of shy away from B Marsh this year and even Decker.
Yeah. Okay. So I did have a 4th item here, and so let's just quickly talk about it fast here.
Yeah,
so the Arizona Cardinals have made an offer to Chris Johnson for a 1-year deal, and apparently that's this morning, Tuesday, August, as of yesterday, Tuesday morning, August 11th, and I just quickly checked the news wire, and there isn't anything about him getting a deal or signing a deal as of Wednesday night at 10:30. So anyways, just keep that in mind if you're listening to this and there was or wasn't a deal. It's why we're talking about it. So anyways, he is mulling over a 1-year deal. So Blister, buy or sell. If he does sign, CJ2K is not even worth 50 cents in your auction.
I buy that. I don't like him. I haven't liked him for a long time, ever since he held out after he had the one good year, and then he was a bum ever since. So I wouldn't buy him. He'd never be on my team. I think they have to try to get themselves some. I've heard different reports, and people are contemplating, are they not happy with Ellington, or they're not happy with this. I just think that they need some type of backfield. I mean, Ellington is not going to stay healthy all year. He's a small guy who gets banged up pretty good. He's a little bit banged up right now. Johnson's been off, I think, with the groin as well. So I think if they're both healthy, Ellington and Johnson will be just fine, and CJ2K wouldn't even get on the field. But I think they just need a little bit of insurance, or they're looking for something, because after those 2 guys, it's pretty bleak. Kerwin Williams and Stefan Taylor, like, these aren't guys that you can rely on week in and week out. And bringing in CJ2K could, if he does play and these guys are banged up, a defensive might think, well, we got to give him some respect, and they can't just blanket every receiver they have. They might just think that just in case he's got something left, and in case he can break one. So maybe it's more of a name game with the opponent's defenses than it is your fantasy team. I don't think your fantasy team could get too excited about CJ2K. Okay.
All right, good. So there's some news items, just 4 of them. I mean, there's lots of, chatter out there, but those are some things that stood out to me heading into tonight, Wednesday. So Blister, let's get into wide receivers a little bit more. We've spoke a lot to it, actually, and we're, almost an hour in here already, Blister. So we've done some good wide receiver talk already. But you can head on over to our website, thefantasyfootballauction.com, take a look at our rankings and the average auction values, or the AAV, which is one thing that we refer to here a lot as we're talking for individual players. If you go to the free area of the site, you can see the top 16 or 17 players. So we give you a good taste there of what we think guys are going for in those upper tiers. And then if you are a paid member to the membership site or the membership area, that's $14.95. So just a little bit more than the price of a magazine for current, up-to-date, as it's happening information. You can see a list of up to, I think, 108 or more wide receivers, because today we're talking about wide receivers. Yeah, 108 all the way down to Sammy Coates. So you can take a look at all those things. And we do have that metric up there now with the value indicator, where we take a look at the positional ranking of values versus the average auction value. And showing you whether or not a guy right now is going as a deal or not. So Blister, I guess first question, not that we want to give away anything. We're not drafting for a little bit yet, but what are you looking at as far as your wide receiver strategy? I know we kind of spoke to some different types of strategies, but what's Mr. Blister's idea this year?
Well, I'm glad we did that mock last week on the air, because my strategy on that mock was to be running back heavy. And prior to that, I'd been in a few drafts, a couple of different, like these, I don't know if you call them pro-ams or whatever, with the fishbowl and a couple other things, where it was even a couple that were snake, obviously, and a couple that were auctions so far. And in those ones, I went in thinking I'm going to make sure my wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 are pretty damn solid, And that was my intent going in. Didn't always work out that way. It didn't work out that way in the fishbowl. My best receiver was Alshon, and then it fell off pretty good, but I'm pretty heavy at running back. I look at that, but I look back at our mock auction last week, and my goal is to go in running back heavy. So I got Forte 56, LaShawn McCoy 44, and Lamar Miller at 25 on my flex.
That's
pretty solid, pretty heavy. But my receivers, Brandon Cooks 35, so I still spent some good money there. Jarvis Landry, I got him for only 16, and Golden Tate, he helped me win some championships last year, Golden Tate. And I think he'll be pretty darn solid again this year, easily wide receiver 2. We talked about you have a stud receiver. Yeah, he's going to get the ball, but he did enough last year with Stafford to earn his trust and to earn him a number of looks as well, right? So, and he was only $7. So, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I got 3 great receivers. Brandon Cooks could easily challenge for a wide receiver 1. Jarvis Landry could be high-end wide receiver 2, and Golden Tate could be low-end wide receiver 2. And I definitely got 3 stud running backs, Forte, McCoy, and Miller. Now, what would I do different? Well, I probably would shave the 56 I paid for Forte. Maybe I'd shave $20 off that and pick up, Justin Forsett. And then that $20 I put into Golden Tate, and suddenly... 27, maybe I got Jordan Matthews in there, who I think should be this year. So, I look at that and think,
DeAndre
I'm not going to pay a lot.
Hopkins in there, or it could be Calvin Benjamin. Yeah.
So, and then you're looking at a team's number 1 receiver. So, they're going to target them a lot. So, that's not a bad thing. Like I said, I'm going to go into the auction quite flexible. Sure, I'd like to go in there and get AJ Green and, Des Bryant and Odell Beckham. That'll be pretty pricey. But if I can get good running backs, and it's scary. Like I have a couple teams out there right now. Oh, I should pull that up real quick. That I'm hurting. I'm really hurting at running back. I've got some good receivers, but I've got 1 running back, and then I don't know who my next one's going to be. Like our ESPN one. There's a good example right there. I went Demarius. This is our ESPN auction we did last week. Demarius Thomas, Randall Cobb. Got Demarius, Randall Cobb, Brandon Cooks, Jarvis Landry, Martavis Bryant, Wheaton, and Marvin Jones. But I got between Thomas, Cobb, Cooks, Landry, and maybe Bryant, some pretty nice receivers. But at running back, I got Jonathan Stewart, who I've never liked. I'm hoping that he can stay healthy, but chances are slim. So I did pick up Cameron Artis-Payne. I got LeGarrette Blount, who's going to be suspended. And I just hate New England's my team. I hate trying to play their backfield in fantasy because I don't know ever what's going to happen. And I got Bishop Sankey, who was a real letdown last year. I'm just hoping that maybe he turns it around, and then my other 2 running backs are meaningless. So it's easy to see that I went heavy wide receiver, very thin at running back. So that scares me because I don't know what will happen there. And there's other ones where, Adrian Peterson, DeMarco Murray, Joseph Randall, hopefully Sims, Job Allen, Matt Jones. I mean, that's pretty heavy where my receivers are Alshon, Allen Robinson, Jarvis Landry again. Those are my top 3. So I guess it's just about finding the right value. And I mean, if you go 3 guys for 150, or you get 5 guys for 3 guys at 50 for 150, or if you get 5 guys at 30, I'd rather have 5 good guys that can put up potentially the same numbers as those 3 guys that cost you 50. So it's all about, and that's what it's all about, I guess, making your money go the farthest and getting the best bang for your buck. So it's going to be one of those 2 things. I've kind of, it's either going to be running back heavy, wide receiver heavy, at least get one stud at each position, like wide receiver and running back. I won't spend much on quarterback and tight end. I'd love to have Gronk again this year, but I just don't think I'll be able to afford him.
Yeah, no, and for sure. I mean, and in that mock, I did that strategy where I went for Gronk and a big name quarterback, and it just makes everything else look a little iffy, you know.
Yeah.
In that mock, I ended up with Aaron Rodgers at $37 and Gronk at $53. So now all of a sudden I'm Melvin Gordon 26 and Andre Ellington for 12, Chris Ivory for for $5. You know, the steal of the draft now could have been Chris Polk for a couple of bucks at the end of the draft. I think he went for $5 just so I could get my 200 out. But yeah, the running backs look a little thin, but maybe not too bad. And then the wide receiver position, I think the steal for me based on that was getting Emmanuel Sanders for $20, because then that at least sets me with something there. But I just don't feel super confident with that team. I think I can get similar production of Aaron Rodgers we talked about Big Ben or even Matt Ryan or something like that, and spend $30 less. And boy, running backs and wide receivers sure look a lot better with $15, let's say, thrown into each of those positions.
For sure they would, yeah.
You know, even if you kept Gronk at 53, it still looks like a better team, right?
It would. I mean, you could throw I got Matt Ryan for $3, but Eli Manning for $1. But say spend $5, $32 more goes a long way into Sammy Watkins and Michael Floyd, or at least Michael Floyd and Ellington. Even you could upgrade with with $32. That's a pretty good upgrade.
Yeah, for sure. And then Slim in that mock draft, he did go wide receiver heavy. That was the strategy for him, and a big name tight end. So we got Julio Jones for 50, AJ Green for 46. He did get Jimmy Graham for $40, which I thought was a little high, but he had to go after him. And so he ends up with Jonathan Stewart for $13, CJ Spiller for 22. I think him as Slim is pretty happy with those two as running backs, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, especially when his wide receiver 3 is Allen Robinson for only $8. I mean, that's I mean, you look at those two running backs, and week in and week out, they could put up top 12 numbers, and you got 3 great receivers who are going to challenge, and then you got probably the number 2 tight end. So, and Eli Manning should be pretty solid again this year, second year in that offense. Odell looks like Victor Cruz could be coming back healthy. Some Ruben Randall in there. I mean, he's going to have a number of targets. Shane Vereen could pick him up just some garbage yards, but he dumps the ball off. If he does that 60, 70 times, he could pick up some.
Lou and Vereen,
so he's got a pretty nice team. No, I'm just saying, talking. No, he doesn't. But I'm just actually, Vereen was next door. Team Hines got him, but for $6. But I'm just saying, he could.
Team Hines.
Look at that. That is a nice team, actually. Oh, really?
You know what? Because he went heavy on the receivers, and so Cobb for 42, Kelvin Benjamin for 30, Andre Johnson for 24, and then his running backs are Forsett 33, Frank Gore for 30. So he's doing okay there. And then he's got Flacco and Tom Brady as his quarterbacks, which should tie him over pretty nicely. I kind of like that team.
You could go into this with, say, a $35 limit and get guys like that, Forsett, Gore, Cooks, Matthews. You have a pretty good team. And there you go. You got like 6 great players that takes you up to $180. Then you got your $1 defense and kicker. That's 8 players, and you got $28 left for your last 7 or however deep your team is, 9. That's not bad.
Yeah, and then just kind of looking down at some of the other ones in the mock, right? We had Team Dreffel. He goes for running back heavy. Just looking at there's 2 teams here with running back heavies. So you look at Jamal Charles, Marshawn Lynch for Team Dreffel versus a team just a couple over, which is Adrian Peterson 66, Eddie Lacy 62. So you're at $128 for those starting 2 running backs. So just looking there, Dreffel decides to save a few bucks on quarterback, right? And then save money at the flex position. So the guy who has AP and Eddie Lacy also picks up Todd Gurley, and he has Drew Brees. So there's $35 tied up there. But I like Dreffel. If you slide over, he still gets Megatron for $49, Keenan Allen for $11, Brandon Marshall's wide receiver 3 for $7. He's got Marvin Jones floating in there. Doug Baldwin on a PPR, Cecil Shorts, some of those guys too, and ends up with Stafford for $1.
Yeah.
It's not a bad looking strategy either. You know what I mean? He gets big name running backs and still lands that wide receiver 1.
Yeah, just looking through this draft real quick, I'm going to throw out some names. This is our mock again. Guys that went for $1 that, you should look to have on your team. I'm just going to look at just strictly $1. Stevie Johnson. You got him. Kyle Rudolph, I think. Josh Huff, take a look at him. Eli Manning these are all $1 guys. Victor Cruz. I'm just going to look real quick here. Don't need to talk about those guys. No. Eddie Royal for $1. Let me see. Dwayne Bowe, Owen Daniels, Teddy Bridgewater, all $1. Danny, no, not so much. Darren Sproles for $1, maybe Cecil Shorts, maybe Danny Amendola. And then last group of guys, Cutler was only $1. Those guys don't matter. Jerick McKinnon might not be a bad guy for Adrian Peterson in order to have. Fred Jackson only $1. I mean, there's some examples of guys, and most of the guys only paid $1 or $2 or $1 for their defense and kickers as well. So, you can budget. You get some pretty good starters if you're okay with having $1 bench spots, and be realistic too. Like in most situations, like we said before, you can go studs and duds, or you can try to balance your lineup, but you can only play your 10 starters or whatever a week. So those guys on your bench might be okay for bye weeks, but there's not too often. If you look at your team at the start of the year and what you end up finishing with, a lot of those guys on your bench, you end up dumping. I guess if they're $1 guys, they're easy to dump too. To pick up, there's always going to be guys that come off the waiver wire. So,
all right. So
whatever.
The name of the game is being flexible, right? And flexible. I guess, for me, I kind of like running back or receiver, where do I get my first deal? And then I can kind of work around that. You know what I mean? And then I'm going to go with that strategy. So if I find a deal at running back and I get, I don't know, let's say I get Justin Forsett for, something nice and low, $20 or something. Now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm going to take that savings and now I'm going after another big name wide receiver because I kind of already I've saved some money over, in the one area. So I kind of like to see who I get first or what's the first big deal. And then my budget kind of rounds around that. For
sure. And that's what I do. I mean, every time I buy a guy, I kind of have like the last, I was just in the Auction Kings big auction draft here, and it was a slow draft on MFL. It was a lot of fun. And I would kind of target what I was willing to pay at each position. And then once I got that guy for more or less, then I adjusted each month. If I got more money, I would, if it cost me more, I'd say, okay, where can I cut back then? And if it cost me less, I would add money to a position I wanted to kind of upgrade and kind of keep going from there. And it worked out quite nice.
So, Blister, let's just go into another question here. Let's take a look at one guy that you think right now that could be your steal of draft. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily he's a $1 guy, but you can include that if you want. But who's the guy that's undervalued right now that's just going to be like he's going to be the game changer?
And we're sticking with wide receiver, right?
Wide receiver, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned earlier John Brown. I'm really curious to see how things continue to unfold for him. I think last year I had him. He ended up with PPR with about 150 fantasy points. It was pretty solid. Him and Larry Fitzgerald were tied or right beside each other in the standings. And let's see, I had Michael Floyd at 44, and I had John 44th ranked. And I had John Brown. He had 103 targets last year. It's the same amount as Larry Fitzgerald. Larry played 2 less games. For some reason, he only caught 48 of them, almost 700 yards, 5 TDs. I think he's a nice value, a guy that could really surprise. I still think Marcus Colston could have a bit of a bounce back here. Everyone thinks he's declining and he's old. And yeah, it's true, but they don't have as many targets. He's still one of Drew Brees' favorite red zone targets, and with Jimmy Graham being gone, I think that could even be more so. Everyone's expecting Josh Hill to step up in his place, but the reports aren't glowing. I mean, they've been trying to sign a tight end, and they were even looking at Jermaine Gresham, who is not young either, and they were going to try to sign him, but somebody else did there. So I think Marcus Colston's a guy you might get at the end of your draft for $3 or less, and he's going to be pretty solid.
Is he going to get less than 100 targets this year?
Colston?
Yeah.
I don't think he should.
Not with Jimmy gone, he can't, right?
With Jimmy gone and Kenny Steele's gone, where those targets have got to go somewhere. And Cooks
so let's
can't get them all.
Say he gets that same stat line. You know, he had 99 targets last year, so let's say he gets his 100, and instead of catching 59 balls, he catches 70 balls, and 3 of those were touchdowns.
Yeah.
Then he's all of a sudden wide receiver 25 or something like that, right?
For sure. And the thing is, too, he's been up until last year. Like, Cooks came onto the scene last year, yes, but he wasn't the number one. Marcus Colston was the number one. So next year, Cooks will be the number one. Cooks is going to get the number one attention, and Cooks is going to get the best, coverage on him. I think Colston is going to, there's a lot of targets to go around with people left. B, they still like him in the red zone. I was reading something yesterday or today about how him and Drew Brees are just always on the same page and blah, 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 blah. And so I just think he could have a huge jump back up into the wide receiver, 12, 14, 15 category even.
Yeah. Well, for me, I just look at a guy. I mean, he's a lot of buzz right now too, but I like Michael Crabtree this year.
I think he could have a good year.
A lot of buzz out of him, and you can, for $1 or $2, you'll be able to get him maybe later in your draft, especially this weekend, right? Like before any preseason, before guys really get a look. You're the degenerate that's listening to pods and doing that type of thing now in early August or mid-August. But Crabtree, I mean, he had 108 targets last year. So does he get that this year?
Yeah, he could. And I mean, he's
probably going to get more than 4 touchdowns. So he jumps up 2 for $1, right?
Yeah, and he is veteran. He is a veteran, right? And I mean, all the buzz will be about Amari Cooper, but you don't know. Like last year was an exceptional year.
That's a good thing because he's not the number one anymore. So the rollover coverage is going Amari Cooper's way, right?
That's right. So he could. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing. I'd like to see him have a big bounce back year and pick it up where we expected him to be the other years.
Yeah, and he is only 27. He's got a. I mean, there's a lot in the tank.
Not old.
Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, sorry, go.
Yeah. Well, I think a guy that you're going to grab at the end of your draft for $1, Devontae Adams. He's one of those guys that almost, to me, I guess he's kind of like a handcuff at receiver, because if Jordy Nelson or Cobb go down, this guy's going to step in and be huge. I think he's got all the talent. Aaron Rodgers speaks quite highly of him. When there's 3 guys to share the ball, it's a little less appealing, but I just think, put him on your bench and one of those guys goes down. I mean, Jordy Nelson's coming off a hip surgery and he's not getting any younger. He's going to be 30 this year if he hasn't turned it yet. So I just think there's a guy that if he gets a chance to play, whether it's week 6, 8, or whatever, due to an injury to the other 2 guys, he's going to put up wide receiver one numbers the rest of the way through. So for $1, stash him late in your draft as well.
Yeah, and then we mentioned Stevie Johnson too. I think he's another name that you can throw in there too. I mean, Phillip Rivers throwing the football, that's can only be helpful, right? And Slim talked about him a couple pods ago too, I think, about some of the value that you can see out of Stevie Johnson. So there are some good guys there. Okay, quick, because we're running low on time here. Who's one guy that you're going to target this year? There's a name out there. Who do you want?
You know what? I look at a lot of the teams I've got already, and Brandon Cooks ends up being on quite a few of them. So I guess that is one guy that I can get usually for $30 to $35 that I think I seem to be owning him quite a bit. Maybe it's time I stayed away from him the rest of the way through. I have enough shares in him already.
And for me, it's Jordan Matthews. That's the guy I have across the board too. So, and at that 26, 27.
Let's switch it up for the next auction. You take Cooks, I'll take Matthews at the big auction in a couple weeks there.
Sounds good. I also, out of the big guns up at the top of the top tier, I'm looking at Julio Jones again as that guy that could win you a championship, right? Like he has the potential to just the ceiling is through the roof, right? So that's another guy in that top tier.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like all the top tier.
Who's the guy you're completely avoiding this year, Blister?
I'd say Jeremy Maclin and Deshaun Jackson pretty well equally. Like, I just don't like them. I think I was in
Yeah.
the same feeling last year, so I've been avoiding them. I throw them out there because I know they're still going to pull down 25, maybe $30 in a draft. So I usually nominate them all the time because I know somebody will like them and be happy to have them, and
Yeah.
probably rightfully so. It's just they're not going to be on my team.
And for me, it's a guy. I mean, I know he helped you out, but I just don't like Golden Tate. I just
No way.
just not a fan, and I don't think for the 12 or $15 or whatever. I just think Matthew Stafford's not very good. And if you have a healthy, I know that when you compare the stats, but if you have a healthy Megatron, I don't know. It frightens me, and Abdullah out of the backfield is going to be catching balls, and maybe Ebron finally does something as a tight end, and then where does he end up? And another name, Brandon Marshall. I just think that it's going to cost you too much money. I think you're going to pay for name, and he's going to be a mid-range wide receiver 3. And I think, if you're going to go on that team we've talked about before, Decker for half the price is going to be as much of a player.
Well, for sure. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so who do you think's overpriced this year? Who's one receiver that is just paying too much money? I just mentioned Brandon Marshall, so you can't. So go.
Yeah, you know what, Mike Evans. I mean, right now it says average auction value is $36, and I know last year he ended up as he was a wide receiver 2, 13th. He finished and he missed a game, and everyone expects him to be bigger and better. It's just this is one guy. My gut's telling me the sophomore slump is going to hit for him. I don't know why. I mean, they got VJax and ASJ, and Dougie Martin looks like he'll be the starter. They have plenty of weapons. They got a young quarterback. I don't know. I just think he regresses a bit this year for some reason. So I'm not willing to pay, $38-$40 for this guy when I think that my gut's telling me to stay away. So that's one guy I think might be a little bit high.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at Kelvin Benjamin, maybe. I think, in the mid-30s is maybe a much. Just looking through because remember, you have to win weeks in order to win championships, not just totals at the back end of your, at the back end of your season. But just going through, and I know he was a rookie, but he's 15 points, 4 points, 17 points, 13 points, 2 points, 10 points, 12 points, 9 points, 2 points. Those are the 19, 16, 5. 8, 10, 5. Like, on your championship weekend, it gives you 4.7 points in a PPR. And that's not, that's not helping you do much of anything, 5 receptions for 47 yards, no scores. So that's just something I think if I'm going to spend $35 or in that area, I want someone that week in, week out is going to get me that consistent,
Yeah. And I am worried about DeAndre Hopkins now. I think he's a talented receiver, no doubt about it. But with no running game potentially there, he's like, if you look at all the rest of the guys in the offense, he's probably the only name most people will recognize, right? There's not a lot of big standout names there anymore. And, Alfred Blue has got the number 1 role for now. My gut tells me he won't have it come week 1 for some reason because people just think he's not that good. So, I worry that DeAndre Hopkins, if you're paying $28-$30 for him, you might not get, not because he's not good, but they don't know. Quarterback play is going to be pretty questionable. And if there's no run game to worry about, then they just got to stop DeAndre. And that's not, I don't like those odds.
Yeah, for sure.
One good player on the team, not good.
Yeah. So, I mean, talent, you'd like to think wins out, but it's not always the case. All right, so Blister, let's just go for the last one here because we're running low on time. Give me your top 5 rookie wide receivers this year because, I mean, last year we were spoiled, but I think there's some guys this year that are going to be able to give us some
my top 5.
Some redraft, yeah.
Well, Amari Cooper's got to be number 1. And after that, I kind of get worried. Rashad Perriman hasn't been healthy, hasn't been looking good. Kevin White, God, you would expect for all the buzz going into the NFL draft that this guy would be getting a little more love come auction day. But, geez, he's probably giving him away. So he hasn't been able to get on the field much at all to show us anything and drive his value up. But I'd have to go Amari Cooper, and then I might even skip past Kevin White. I'll take Rashad Perriman still. I'm curious about, I think Devin Funchess will be of rookie receivers. Yeah, I think he'll be up there. And then I'm going to, you know what? I haven't heard a lot until just recently, finally, and I'm starting to hear some rave reviews about Dorial Green Beckham. So I'm kind of curious that he does okay. And Justin Hardy is the other one I wanted to ask. I thought Matt Harmon was going on the pod. I wanted to ask him. I mean, he ranked out Justin Hardy in his reception perception going into the draft. He was 8th or 9th, I want to say, for rookies receivers. So his numbers were well from all the studies he did. And then he goes to Atlanta, who likes to throw the ball. And, they got Julio, which will get all the attention. Roddy's getting pretty old. They haven't had a good tight end to catch the ball. Harry Douglas left, so I was just thinking, well, maybe Justin Hardy would be the likely thing, but I haven't really read a whole lot on him yet. He's a guy you can pick up for $1 at the end of your draft. I think Funchess could be a good one. He could end up being, because of the situation, another red zone target for Cam. Not that Cam will give it to him. Cam probably want to run it in every time and rip the shit open like Superman.
Low floor, but high ceiling, right?
Yeah.
Swing for the fence.
Do you have any other guys that I missed?
And I just kind of think of Aguilar too. Just think him in that Eagles offense, right? Yeah. And there's been good reports coming out of camp. Devontae Parker's a guy that's always been highly ranked, but banged up. So, I don't think these guys I'm necessarily drafting. They're going to be waiver wire guys for me. Sure. Personally, I like Jalen Strong too in Houston, that opposite, because you do have that clear-cut number one, so you could get some stuff out of there too. So, and I'm interested to see if bringing in Jimmy Graham as the number one tight end now in Seattle, does a speedster like Tyler Lockett just, as a flyer have a couple of big games. I think in dailies he could be an interesting.
I think he could be interesting. Last year Paul Richardson was a speedster they brought in who was supposed to be wonderful,
but you just wonder though if because Jimmy's going to hold safeties, he has to hold safeties over the middle of the field, so they don't have any sort of rollover coverage that's going to be necessary there. I've said it twice, but that's, I don't know. I just wonder if that isn't kind of a game changer to allow kind of some of that deep ball stuff.
Well, it could be if they're going to be willing to do that, but I always worry about that passing attack, and I think other guy Philip Dorsett has been impressing everybody.
But he's the same type of thing too, right?
He's got to get about 2 or 3 injuries in front of him before he can probably play a prominent role with Andre there and Ty, and they'll throw it to Fleener and Allen, and there's a lot of bodies to share the ball with. Excuse me.
Oh boy, must be time to shut down the pod here. All right, so I think so. We made her. I think. Anyways, we're still connected, so we'll see what happens. I'm excited to shave off the cabin beard tomorrow morning. That. It's really gray down in this area too.
I noticed that too.
Anyways, I just saw that on the camera there. I thought that's and my kid's artwork in the back. You like some of that?
It's
good. Eh?
That is very good. I picked up on that.
Well, I had to change locations because everyone was still scrambling around tonight. So anyways, that wraps up our wide receiver special. I believe next week we're going to take a look at running backs. I think that's the plan if I looked at my schedule properly. Don't forget to head on to iTunes, give us a ranking and a rating and a comment. That only helps us. If you're looking to support the podcast, that helps us to move up the ranks, and that just helps everything. So if you want to support the podcast, head on over to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening and do some reviews and ratings there. And don't be afraid to head on over to the website, thefantasyfootballauction.com, and take a look at the membership area. There's a lot of good stuff, 20 plus auction specific articles that have been written this summer, and a lot of deep stuff as far as rankings and tiers and downloadable sheets and those types of things too. So feel free to go over and take a little peek at that. And if if that's not interesting to you, you'd rather buy the magazine, which I went off on Twitter the other day too, or on other people's websites. I went to a friend of the podcast, shall we say?
No.
Their website, not one player has a quote unquote auction value of over $50.
No way.
Not one.
Maybe
And someone on
they're
Twitter
doing
said,
$100
well, because
budget.
that's won't no. And not and then someone on Twitter came back to me and said, well, that's because those guys, no one will go for more than $50. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like
Really?
yeah, you mean to tell me that Le'Veon Bell's not going to go for more than $50?
Really?
Yeah.
That's
And
not right.
it just blows my mind. And then people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to that website to figure out my auction stuff. And or open up, and I will say it, the USA Today fantasy football magazine, and the 101 is Matt Forte.
Really? What?
Yeah.
From what?
Yeah, USA Today.
Really?
So you go all the way back. Yeah. It's written in May, published. It doesn't get on the shelves till July. And there's the guy walking into your draft, and he goes, oh, yeah, I'm going to spend $48 on Forte because he's the biggest name player out there. Now, first of all, $48 is not for the most expensive player. And second of all, it's not Matt Forte.
Well, we got to invite that guy to our draft.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, for those of you who are listening to the pod, thanks so much. This is why we do it, because I look at that stuff and it just makes me mad. It literally just makes me mad. And I mean, I did it. I sent it to the guys on our little group chat. I mean, I'm at the store looking through the fantasy magazines, and I actually was getting mad. I just had to put them down because the values just made no sense, and nothing made sense. There was 3 magazines I picked up. There was 2 pages that had auction information on it. Anyways,
that's it, eh?
Yeah, but people say $14 is too much money for our membership, which already just blew everybody out of the water. So just
you have to tell me more numbers off the air there.
Yeah, I will. I'll tell you a little bit. Anyways, so that's the podcast. The Blister, I'll see you after the wedding. I can't even golf. I've been wanting to do this golf stuff. Nothing's even going to work out. I don't even think next week, because we're all going back up the lake again.
Oh.
And then heading into Winnipeg for the goalie camp. And
yeah. We had Shinny tonight. We had Shinny hockey tonight in Dryland. Went well. Yeah,
there you go.
It's good, yeah.
Good. Anyways, so Blister, I don't know. I just see you in the chat and whatever. And Slim, if you're out there, hopefully you won your playoff game and you come back with nothing but smiles for the pod next week. And for everybody else out there, I'll see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.